So I'm an art school boy that did a theatre degree to begin with and got into multimedia in the sort of, right at the beginning of multimedia in the sort of early 80s, early to mid 80s. So that gave me my first insight about working with visual images and accompanying that with live performance or immersive audience interaction. And you know, I worked in that for a long time, and as a creative, you often lose sense of purpose and maybe have mental health issues around sense of purpose. And so I ended up with depression and took some tablets and they were terrible, didn't work at all, shocking, went the opposite way. And I just went out and started kayaking. We had some kayaks in Sydney on the harbour and began kayaking. And what happened out of that was a sense of a physical sense of repair, first of all. There was a sense of physical repair, and then came a sense of mental repair because you were on the water, within nature, all those sorts of things. And I wanted to record the experiences I was feeling and show those experiences to people. That was all I wanted to do initially. And they were beautiful reflections on the surface of the water that reminded me of modern masters. It reminded me of people such as Rothko and the modern masters that I'd had through my own art background and art education. And I put these images up on Facebook amongst my friends that are artists and musicians and playwrights and all the other sorts of things. And they all came back and said, wow, these are really great, Ralph, really, really good. And in Australia, if your colleagues say they're very good, you go, well, what do you mean? You know, what do you say? What do you want? Sort of thing. But they kept supporting me. And out of it came an opportunity to do an exhibition for an organisation called the Black Dog Institute in Australia. The Black Dog Institute is one of the world's leaders around research in bipolar, depression, anxiety, and those sorts of things. And they asked me whether I might like to tell my story about my reparation or the transformation that took place when I started to combine the physical and the creative. And this was the manifestation of that work. The first thing is that it's quite fascinating when people come back to you and say, this work is really beautiful. I feel really uplifted when I look at this work. I can relate to this work. It's very peaceful. It's really meditative. And to get that kind of feedback is really important for an artist. And often an artist doesn't get feedback like that because, you know, in the exhibition, he doesn't get to talk to the viewers or get to talk to the buyers even or whatever. So I've had the very good fortune to have my own gallery and come to most of my own exhibitions, so I get this feedback. I think in the first instance, I didn't believe it. It was kind of like, well, how can I change your life? How can I affect you the way I'm affecting you? You know, and on reflection, what I did, and it was unintentional, I captured the feeling that I was having as this journey was taking place around being in nature. I only make work while I'm on the water. I don't make work on land for exhibition. It's only when I'm on the water. And when I'm in nature, so that means when you're at the mercy of nature, when you're making this work. And it was deliberately designed to be aesthetic. It wasn't designed to be political or social. It was designed to be aesthetic, to convey an emotion of what I was feeling as I was experiencing this thing. So when you get that feedback from people that you've actually not articulated it in the first instance, but they've articulated, the viewers have articulated it back to you, that's really powerful from an artist's perspective. So that was the first thing that changed. And then the next thing was to understand that I don't see myself as a photographer because I don't produce any of the work on photographic paper at all. I produce the work on fine art etching rag, on watercolour paper, original old-fashioned watercolour paper. And the other thing that I'm doing is I'm using water-based inkjets to print onto this material. So I see myself as a digital watercolourist almost, as if you want, as a better way of describing what I do. I see myself as an artist working with the digital, but because it's associated with watercolour and it's following the old-fashioned watercolour methodologies, except in a contemporary context, that's how I see myself. Did that happen straight away? No, it's like any creative journey. Suddenly, that creative journey that you're going through sits outside of you. You don't have control out of that or you don't have control of that creative journey. You have to have discussions with your brain about what's going on, about what's occurring. And I think the other thing that was absolutely profoundly insightful for me is I have a rare eye condition. I have a rare eye condition called keratoconus, and that's the disintegration of the cornea in my eyes. I was sitting in the surgery. This only occurred probably 4 or 5 years ago, but it gave a lot more meaning to why my work's the way it is. I volunteer at the eye hospital for trainee surgeons to look at, because I've got all these complicated conditions, and as a final exam, the doctors come in and they look down there, I forget what they call the instrument, but they look down it and they have to diagnose my conditions, etc. So I was sitting with the leading eye surgeon, who he and I now do lectures around sight and perception and how we make meaning. I was sitting, and he had a trainee surgeon behind him, and he said, have a look at Ralph's eyes. And he said, the guy, he has keratoconus. And he turned to the surgeon and said, he can't see straight lines. And that for me was like, whoa, what's this mean? Because if you look at my work sometimes has focus in it and sometimes doesn't have focus in it. It doesn't have strong edges. So if I look at an edge, I can see an edge, but I see a blur right along that edge when I look at it. So suddenly that gave so much more meaning to why people would say, your work is unique. We haven't seen anything like it before. So that's how the art itself and my conversation with my art has changed me as a person. Photography is a really interesting industry. You know, historically it's relatively new. You know, we don't have the epic Cavaggios or the epic Davids, or, you know, so it's a very new technology in a way. So I think it's still evolving, and with the advent of the internet and, you know, just artificial intelligence, for example, I think we're only at the beginning of what it can potentially do. And I think the other thing too is I wonder how long cameras are going to be with us, because I think this is where it's going to come from completely. It's going to come from, we're not going to have cameras very much longer. You know, it's the paperless office argument, but the stuff that you can get out of this is quite amazing. And Australian Photography magazine did a feature on my work. They came to me, and I took the editor out kayaking to show him what I was doing. And he was the one that said to me, I'm not carrying a camera, I'm carrying a phone. And I said, what does that mean? He said, oh, cameras are finished. This is where it's going to happen. So I think we're at the very early stages of of photography in a strange sort of way. And it'd be really interesting in 100 years' time to see what artificial intelligence is going to do with it, you know.